And we're away. So the 129th University boat race on its way. Cambridge, this side on the Surrey station in the yellow boat. And we look now to see who gets the early advantage as they come towards the boathouses from where they embarked quite some time ago. Cambridge particularly came out 40 minutes before the start of the race in order to get themselves warmed up. Quite a big crowd here today on both sides of the river. There's the Fulham wall on the far side, and you can see quite a big crowd over there. A lot of the people who were watching the Fulham-Chelsea match just up the road a bit have come out to watch the race afterwards. And as they come past the boathouses, it looks as though Oxford have a very slight lead. And in fact they do. They have about a quarter of a length lead. Oxford leading.
Yes, Oxford have gone off for a very sharp start, and they are now about a quarter of a length up.
And in fact, it looks as though Oxford are pulling away a little bit, and they're very nearly, as we can see from our helicopter shot, a length up now. Now, if they can get clear water by the time they come to the end of the Middlesex Bend, they can then move over to Cambridge's station, take their water, and then they will have the advantage of the huge Surrey Bend. This is the thing that Cambridge now must fight against for all they're worth, because if they do find themselves behind with clear water, then almost certainly they're going to lose the race early on. They've got to hold Oxford at all costs at this point.
Crew's now beginning to pick up the worst of the water now. See spray on the blades of both boats.
John Bland, the stroke of Oxford. Simon Harris, the president of Cambridge, is also the stroke. Barman Ewan Pearson for Cambridge, up the front of the Cambridge boat. He's the man who had shoulder trouble, so there's a query there whether that shoulder will hold up all right for over 4 miles. And of course in the Cambridge boat at Bowen number 2, the two front men there over on the far side, they were the people who were out of the boat early this week with a virus infection. They had flu. There's the Fulham football ground down on the right-hand side on the Middlesex station. And as you can see, Oxford are fighting very hard indeed to get clear water, and they've almost got it.
It looks now as if Oxford are about 3/4 of a length up. The Oxford Cox has now steered slightly to cut across towards the Middlesex station, and maybe by a sharp change of direction gain another canvas.
They're coming rapidly now towards the first of the timing points. The mile is the first timing point.
The rough water, of course, is a great leveller, and the worse the water is, the more difficult it will be for either crew to establish a clear advantage.
And this is the point where they're hitting the really rough water, where they're going straight into the headwind and against the tide, which of course is following the boats. So you get the tide meeting the headwind, and that creates the very heavy rough water. And this is what they're going through at this moment.
Cambridge rating 34 now, Oxford just a fraction lower.
Now we get the other view as the two crews come towards us. This Oxford 8, some experts on the Tideway this week have been telling me that it could well be the greatest Oxford crew of all time. They're a huge crew. They're the heaviest crew of all time in the boat race, and they average 14 stone 8.5 a man. And look at that lead they've got now, which means they're half a stone heavier per man. They've got their early lead on the Middlesex station, and now they can take Cambridge's water anytime they like, and then they have got the advantage of this immense Surrey Bend, which is coming up.
I think, Harry, any minute we will see the Oxford Cox move over towards the Surrey station and start looking for the shelter under the Harrods wall.
There's always a danger, of course, Penny, isn't there? If they try to move too far over the shelter, they come out of the stream, the fast stream.
Yes, but in these sort of conditions, I think they will look for the shelter first. After Harrods, the conditions will probably be very good indeed.
But it looks from our helicopter shot as though they must have very nearly a 2-length lead, Oxford. And so they're in good shape at the moment to get their 8th consecutive win. Now Cambridge really have got to try to spurt somewhere here to get back into contention. Now, do they have it in them? And the time at the mile for Oxford is 4:09 for Oxford and 4 minutes 14 seconds for Cambridge. And that is pretty slow time by recent years. The slowest time of recent years to the mile was 1980, when both crews reached there in 4 minutes and 6 seconds. That's the slowest recently, and Oxford have taken 3 seconds longer than that to get there, which gives you an indication of the sort of water they've had to come through, and the wind. Now you can see the Surrey Bend coming into it, and that lasts for 2 miles. Crabtree Reach now, approaching Hammersmith Bridge. And at this point, of course, the leading crew have the comfort of glancing across and seeing the others following them, and that gives them a very nice feel indeed. Keep the other crew in sight. You know what you've got to do. You can see them spurt, and you can put in a spurt as well.
Now, Harry, we can begin to see the technique of the Oxford crew. As you said, it is loaded with internationals. It has a lot of individual talent in the crew, but not quite the cohesion that we saw in the superb crew of 1981. I think the difference there is really the rhythm round the turn that we talked about 2 years ago. The technique used by the Canadians in the 6 and 7 seats is dissimilar from the way we would teach it in this country, and mainly it's dissimilar round the turn, and it was the rhythm of Bland and Andrews in 1981 that was giving this superb cohesion. But this crew too is an outstanding crew. They've now got something like 2.5, 3 lengths clear water from Cambridge.
And they've reached Hammersmith Bridge, which is the second of the timing points. And in fact, just before they got to the bridge, Cambridge increased their rate of stroke. They went up to 34 and were striking slightly higher than Oxford. So clearly they were making an effort there to get back at the leading crew. Oxford's time at Hammersmith Bridge last year was 6:53, but there'll be nothing like that this year. And the times, Oxford have reached Hammersmith Bridge in 7 minutes 30 seconds and Cambridge 7:36. Now the conditions from this point will get progressively better, because as they take that big Surrey turn, so the wind will begin to follow them and follow the tide, and so the water will smooth itself out and rowing conditions will become very much better indeed. And in fact, Cambridge now, I don't know, Penny, they seem to me to be holding the gap a bit.
Yes, I think that probably Oxford now will just try to lengthen out and just settle into a good stride. They've got the tailwind, settle into the rhythm, and probably wait maybe another minute or so before they try to press another advantage. You can see here the conditions are really very good indeed now.
Now the whole point is whether Cambridge have the ability and the stamina to come back at Oxford from this point. Great pity for Cambridge. They won the toss, and that's very rare for them. In recent years, well, Oxford had won the toss 7 times in the previous 8 years, but Simon Harris called correctly as the challenger this year in the toss, and he chose the Surrey station, and Oxford have denied them the chance to use it. There's the stroke and president of Cambridge, Simon Harris, who must be bitterly disappointed at this moment, but he's not going to give up.
I'm sure he is. He's technically a very good oarsman, cool-headed, very tough, and I'm sure that he's going to keep Cambridge pushing on, hanging on, right to the finish.
Well, the gap is not all that much. It may well be, as Penny said, that Oxford know exactly what they've got to do now and are content to sit there and hold the lead. But if anything, I would have thought the lead has diminished a bit. Well, it's about 2.5 lengths, I suppose. Chiswick reach now. Look at that marvellous armada of boats following this race. Always a wonderful sight, particularly when we can look down from this height from our helicopter. Isn't that a great picture? But not so great for Cambridge at this point, knowing that they've got a well-nigh impossible task ahead of them, unless something cracks in the Oxford boat. Remember, they have had 2 men ill this week, Bowman and number 2, Lang and Clay, and in the later stages of this race, where stamina becomes vital, well, if there is a weak link somewhere in that boat, that's where it could be.
I think the fact that the pressure is now off Oxford and they can relax and stride out, probably they will take the advantage of being able to do that, so that they do nurture their 2 recently ill men in the 2 bow seats.
The next timing point, Chiswick Steps. Can't be far away. Chiswick Steps is 2.5 miles up the course, and it marks the point where the Surrey Bend runs out and where the Middlesex Bend again will take over. That's the perfect illustration of it. As you can see, they're very close now to the end of the Surrey Bend. And at Chiswick Steps we have the times: 11 minutes 40 for Oxford and 11:54 to Cambridge. So 14 seconds between them at Chiswick Steps. And a correction to the Oxford time, it's 11:45. 11:45, 11:54, 9 seconds between.
Oxford now down to 31, Cambridge striking just over 33. See now the close-up to pick up the feel of what it's like to be actually sitting there in that Oxford boat at the moment. And feel the rhythm round the turn. All 8 oarsmen in cohesion and unity. And again, the shot from the bow, we can see the synchronization of the blades on the entry into the water.
Just as a check on the times coming up the course, there was 5 seconds between them at mile, Oxford leading of course, 6 seconds between them at Hammersmith Bridge, and 9 seconds between them at Chiswick Steps. So in fact Oxford have been increasing their lead all the way. Bowman for Oxford, Bill Lang. He's one of those men who were down earlier this week with flu. He and the man he's sitting behind, Hugh Clay. So they're the people we look at this stage of the race to see whether there's any sign of tiredness there. And they don't seem to be suffering too much to me. And the lead now rather more, just be 4 lengths. Now there's the point called the crossing coming now, which is where the Surrey Bend runs out and they begin to get the advantage of the Middlesex Bend, and where the cocks will take the boats across to get the advantage of the Middlesex station. And that's the point we've reached, with Barnes Bridge coming up ahead. This is Corney Reach and Duke's Meadows here on this side, the Middlesex side.
Oxford have now increased their rate to 33.
And now, unless some disaster befalls the Oxford crew, they are going to record their 8th successive win in this boat race. It's not a record for Oxford. Last century they had 2 sequences of 9 successive wins, and of course it's still a long way behind Cambridge's great run between the wars of 13 successive wins. Nonetheless, this really is another impressive performance from Oxford, who really haven't done anything wrong in this race so far. Barnes Bridge, where they must go through the central arch, and at this point they've come 3.5 miles and they've got approximately 3/4 of a mile to go.
Oxford actually taking Barnes Bridge rather wide, may have lost half a length or so on that.
See how the boats are turning around this Middlesex Bend as they come towards the finish now. We're in the closing stages. We'll get the time from Barnes Bridge at any moment. And it's about between 4 and 5 minutes. And Oxford reached Barnes Bridge in 15 minutes and 52 seconds, and Cambridge 16 minutes and 4 seconds. So 12 seconds between them at that point. Another 3 seconds up for Oxford on the previous time. And this is a considerably slower race than last year, which of course was rowed on flat, calm water with virtually no wind. They're some 40 seconds slower than last year, as would be expected.
If this becomes the 8th successive win for Oxford, it will of course be the 6th successive win for Boris Rankov. And also he's probably going to be the only man who can claim to have rowed in the boat race 3 times on bow side and I think 3 times on stroke side, Harry.
That is absolutely right. And of course he rowed a couple of times in the other race, the reserve race for ISIS. So Rankov's experience of the tideway on boat race day is really quite extraordinary, and it will certainly never be. Rules in any case are going to be changed for next year, and somebody like Rankov just won't qualify to row in the race again. And it looks as though Cambridge may be just making a little bit of ground here on Oxford as we come towards the finish. It's certainly not been a runaway win. There's no way you'd call it that. But it's a double Oxford victory, because in the other race, which was run some half an hour earlier, the Oxford reserve crew ISIS beat Goldie, the Cambridge reserve crew, by 8 lengths in 19 minutes and 27 seconds. And this is going to be a victory of considerably smaller dimensions than that. It looks as no more now than about 3.5 lengths between. Mortlake Brewery over on the far side, famous landmark of this race. Of course, the old joke is that you always row the race from Putney to Mortlake towards the brewery, because nobody in their right mind would ever row away from a brewery. And now we come to the finishing stage, and you'll see the blue pole on this side of the river that marks the finish, and Oxford are going to get there first. There's the finish. Oxford are there. They've won the boat race 8 times in succession. And here come Cambridge, not too far behind. Gallant effort. They chose the Surrey station, but it didn't come off. And so another boat race is over. The 129th University boat race won by Oxford. Well, that was maybe not one of the most exciting of all races, but it was a fine, accomplished win by Oxford, and they never looked to be in any sort of trouble at all. and the winning time is 19 minutes and 7 seconds, and Cambridge got there in 19 minutes and 20 seconds. 13 seconds between them at the finish. 19:07, and that's the slowest time since 1980. 1980, Oxford won in 90 minutes and 20 seconds. And we'll get the official distance in a moment. I would have thought it was something like 3.5 lengths, I don't know. What about that? And Cambridge and Simon Harris, the stroke and president there, well, defeated again. But they'll be back next year for another try. And of course, eventually, this sequence of Oxford has got to be broken, and it will be. And as they paddle under Chiswick Bridge, they paddle towards the boathouses where they disembark, and where the winning crew will be presented with the Ladbroke Trophy by Mr. Neil McFarlane, the Minister of Sport. You can see the two boats now heading inshore. Well, there must be, they don't look elated, but there must be some elation in that crew. They've done everything expected of them. And Boris Rankov, you can see him there, he's got rather less hair than the rest. And, well, I wonder what his feelings are at this moment. 6 wins in a row. Never been done before and will never be done again. So 6 months of tremendously hard work comes to an end on this famous river. And the winning distance was rather more than I anticipated. It was 4.5 lengths. Well, it was 3.25 lengths last year, 8 lengths the year before, and then of course in 1980 the famous close race when Oxford won by a mere canvas, which is about 6 feet. Did that go very much as you expected, Penny?
I think it did. It's sad for Cambridge. They clearly have had the strongest crew they've had in the last few years, and each time they get a better crew, so Oxford gets yet a better crew.
Well, they do seem to grow them massively these days. This crew weighed, average weight, over 14 stone. Cambridge themselves, which a few years ago would have been thought to be immensely heavy. But the official weights, we're told, for Oxford average out at 14 stone 8.5. Although the story goes that on the day of the official weigh-in, the Oxford crew came onto the scales in wet tracksuits, which seems odd to me. I don't know why they don't weigh in like boxers and come in either totally stripped or at least down to their underpants.
Yes, I think that would actually be a far better way of doing it. But the interesting thing is, Harry, you look at these oarsmen and they don't look fat. And the indication of a good oarsman is often that he carries weight and you can't actually see it because it's power weight, it's muscular weight. And of course they're all very tall, and if you are that tall, then you're going to be pretty heavy as well.
I would think there's some relief in those two crews because the conditions were not nearly as bad as they threatened to be earlier in the day. There was a lot of wind here, particularly this morning, and when the tide came up this afternoon, one expected that the conditions would get very, very rough indeed, and in fact they didn't.
It's all it.
Well, now we can go down to Tony Gubber, and he has got Richard Young, the winning president, with him.
Well, Richard, congratulations are obviously in order, but the margin of the victory was so emphatic.
Well, I was quite pleased with that, yes. I was surprised we got away so quickly and cleanly. Our start was good. The water wasn't as rough as we'd expected, and we got a nice clean start, which pleased us well. But it was a hard race all the way. We got out to a decent distance, but they kept pushing us. I mean, it might have looked a long way early on to the viewers, but when you're in that boat and you've only got a length of clear water and they're still pushing you, you've got to push hard to keep away.
But having lost the toss, what was your tactic, having had the Middlesex station?
Well, we were uncertain as to which station was going to be best. If the water had been rougher, Middlesex probably would have been better. But Middlesex station gives you an early advantage around that first bend. and we took advantage of it. It was as simple as that. We got ourselves clear and we had no trouble.
Watching from the side, would it be right to think your cocks almost forced them over to the Surrey station and then took a very quick turn towards the Fulham Football Club?
Might have been something of that. I know that Cambridge traditionally take a slightly wider bend there towards Surrey, and we tend to stay a bit shallower on the Middlesex side. So I think, in fact, the Cambridge boys were going where they wanted to.
Just towards the end, it looked perhaps as though the bow, who'd had influenza, was just beginning to lose a bit of puff and perhaps wasn't pulling quite so hard.
I couldn't see him. I haven't spoken to him yet. We made it across the line all right, so I'm well pleased.
And what are your thoughts for Cambridge? Having come to the river so many times and lost, what could you possibly say to them?
Well, I've got nothing but admiration for them, particularly last year's President Roger Stevens, who did a tremendous effort to get them really back in contention, and we had a very close race then. They produced another damn good crew this year. Okay, we produced a better one.
But not good enough. The presentation's about to be made by Mr. Neil McFarlane. If we could ask you to wander up there, Richard.
Is the rest of the crew coming?
Yes.
Boris?